Katie Rucky. I am with Interfolio. I'm an implementation specialist, part of the implementation and consulting services team. And I am joined today, I'm going to start on this side with Palo Alto University. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Sure, thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone, how are you doing? Good, great. My name is Kelly Coker, and I'm the Assistant Provost for Faculty Success at Palo Alto University. I'm really happy to have this conversation with you today and with my colleagues. For me, it's interesting to come to this work from the role I was in before. I've been a full-time faculty member at Palo Alto since 2017. So I sort of came into the role with the perspective of what it's like to be on the faculty end with some of these systems and experiences. So happy to share some of that with you today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anne-Marie Stratton, and I have the privilege of working in the Office of Faculty Success for the longest tenure of the office. It just started about 3 years ago, and I had the opportunity to work with our faculty slightly less than that 3-year tenure, and so it's exciting to get to speak to you again with all of you to talk about buy-in.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And I'll turn it over now to Florida Gulf Coast University.
You're always looking out for me. All right, I'm Andy Clemens, Florida Gulf Coast University. I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Academic Affairs, Administration, and Budget in the Office of the Provost. I often say that that just means give it to Andy, she'll figure it out. Faculty Affairs and Faculty Success is one of our main goals in our office, and we will share shortly some of the Interfolio products that we're using.
Hi everyone, my name is Kristen Toth and I am the Academic Personnel Coordinator at Florida Gulf Coast University. I help Andy when she has to figure things out. And I've worked in the office since 2018 and I was on board with the start of us implementing Interfolio back in 2021. So excited to be here today.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Andy. We're going to progress another slide. And I'll move over to Palo Alto University to speak a little bit about your institution.
Hello again. So Palo Alto University is a wonderful institution in Palo Alto, California, slightly about 7 to 10 minutes away from Stanford for context of where that is located. We are a relatively small institution with just 56 faculty, with our academic departments focusing on mental and behavioral health, mainly for graduate school programs. And what's unique about our institution is that while we do have a good amount of residential faculty and students, we do have lots of individuals that are remote, and so a lot of our faculty are also in other states, which makes it a little different when trying to communicate with everyone.
I got the power now. All right, thank you. We'll move over to Kristen.
All right, and then a little background about FGCU. We're a mid-sized public institution located in Southwest Florida. We currently have RPT and FAR, and we're comprised of 6 colleges and 2 schools. We have over 16,000 students currently enrolled with almost 700 faculty members. Majority of those are in unit, and then we have a small portion that are out of unit. We're also unique in that we're a non-tenure granting institution, and so our faculty are on continuing multi-year rolling contracts, and we have 4 different tracks of faculty. So we have instructors, professors, librarians, and our academic advisors, and we're also governed by a collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you so much. Now, we all had a very good discussion of how exactly we wanted to create this panel discussion for you today. And so we put together 4 main themes for our discussion. We wanted to bring in faculty perspectives, and then taking those perspectives, how institutions are putting that data together, gathering that data, and then those models from that data for improved engagement and data integrity. And we did not want to leave this panel discussion off without providing everyone attending today with some practical tips and advice. So these are the 4 themes leading our discussion today. And with that, I'll move us to our first question. So this is a big question. I'll leave it on the screen for a little bit. And we'll start off with Florida Gulf Coast University. And the question is, as you can see, but I'll read it anyway, how have faculty understood the purpose of the faculty activity reporting or FAR system, for example, compliance, professional storytelling, evaluation, or advocacy? And how has that understanding evolved? I'll start off there. We have a little small question as well underneath that, but that's a big question.
That's a lot of questions. So I just want to point out a couple key pieces. Purpose, how do we sell the purpose to faculty? And how do we tell that story? So when we think about that last question about communication, that was really important for Florida Gulf Coast University. It was important to us to be mindful of our communication. So when you say, how did you create buy-in with the faculty, or how did you sell that purpose? Did anyone in the room have faculty that were just running to beat down your door because they were so excited for a new system? Well, we certainly didn't. So we had to really think about how we were going to frame our language. We talked about things like, instead of calling it a requirement for reporting, which is very much real, we talked about professional record. We talked about telling their story, and we talked about things like making invisible labor transparent. Things that are important to the faculty, we wanted them to feel like we understood and that we were doing this for good reasons, right? The other thing, when we talked about strategies for communication, a couple of years ago we did a presentation here about our 5 strategies for cultivating collaboration, and you can see in that on the slide some of what I just told you. I think part of that mindful communication is really important to think about that, because you're trying to build trust. If you want to have engagement, if you want the faculty to feel positive about the system and the changes that you're making, you have to be able to build trust, and you have to be ready to support them. So that's probably what was really important to us. Do you have something you want to add?
I was just going to say, a lot of the times we heard, especially from faculty, that they were overburdened, and we didn't have a clear way to see workload across our units, and especially for the department chairs. So I feel like the system has really allowed for that, and also the VITA function in FAR is a great way to sell to faculty that if they need to export a certain subset of data for like a grant submission or something else, they're able to do that with that functionality.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to reverse back the slide just to get the question back here. But over to Palo Alto University, how have faculty understood the purpose of FAR, and how has that understanding evolved?
I really appreciate the focus that Andy was talking about with that mindful messaging. I think at Palo Alto University, we've had a mechanism in place for faculty evaluation, end-of-year evaluation, that predates when we moved it into the Interfolio system. So when we started using Interfolio, it's not that the annual data reporting or capturing faculty activities was new to our faculty, so that kind of helped to ease the transition. But I think initially, even that process already felt like it was just about compliance. It was just about a have to, something that we're required to do. And there really wasn't clarity for faculty about, why are we doing this? What is the benefit to me? What is the benefit to the university? So I think it was more about like, okay, teach me how to use this tool, tell me what I need to put in, I'll put it in, I'll probably come back to you kicking and screaming a few times and saying I don't understand how to do this, and then Anne-Marie would just do it. So I think we had that kind of rollout, which wasn't really about the tool necessarily, it was just about the messaging that even predated when we started trying to systematize it. So I feel like what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years is refine that messaging as to why. Why is this helpful to you? Why is it helpful to us? We've started using the language that I think you all launched with, which was really smart, which is, how do we tell the story of the work you do as faculty? And it doesn't mean there still isn't a compliance part, like we're not trying to sugarcoat that. The truth is we need that data. We need that data for regional accreditation reporting, for our internal data reporting, and we really need that data to begin to understand the workload activities of our faculty, and are they doing the things that we think are consistent with what the expectations are for their workload. So the compliance piece is there and it's real. And I don't think the messaging has to take away from that, but how do you add to that? And how do you really kind of move into these spaces where faculty are beginning to see the benefit to them? And we're going to talk a little bit in one of the questions to come about how that has shown up for us in the stories we actually are telling to faculty. See, add anything, Anne Marie? Okay, Anne Marie says no, we're good.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on to our next question, and that is, across both implementation, so when we're first starting out with the product, and then post-go-live phases, what mechanisms have you used to gather faculty input? And for this one, I'm going to hand it right back to Palo Alto University, and then we'll switch over to Florida Gulf Coast. All right.
I think one of the major components to communication, and I think Kristen shared this at the training yesterday, that not everyone reads emails. And so relying on one source of communication is not the best way to go about that. So you kind of have to be flexible with the type of communication and ways that you can get input from your faculty. And so, you can do when we first were implementing, we had a wonderful pilot program that was helpful to get input, but that was obviously just a small amount of our faculty. And so we have opened it up for, we do drop-ins, we do one-on-one sessions, because some of our faculty are not the most tech savvy. And by giving them the opportunity to work with us of like, okay, I'm not gonna do it for you, but how can I work with you to get this? Is it easier to do a different kind of communication, and so we can upload it? I mean, the bulk upload is a game changer, and I thank you so much. That has made my life so much easier. But how do you work with those faculty to make sure that all forms of that? I think another key thing is working with the faculty leadership to make sure that everyone on that side of the faculty have the same communication, explanation of why we're doing something, so that you're not the only one communicating, that you have a team of partners of the faculty to make sure that all of the things that you're saying is streamlined. But I do think Zoom department chair meetings tends to be the most successful. Anything you would like to add, Kelly?
Only that I think one thing we've learned is that it's almost like this, I don't know what the term is for it, but almost like a cascading communication approach works best. So you can feel like you've said it clearly and directly in an email, and that's great, and it probably has everything that's needed. But then if you talk with the department chairs and they reinforce it in a department meeting, or then you go to the faculty senate and you ask the faculty senate for input, we really would love to know what the faculty think about this piece. And then it goes out from the faculty senate to the faculty. So they're hearing about it from the different messengers, even if we're still sort of the source from which it starts, if that makes sense.
It does. I like it. I agree, that cascading approach. Yeah. Thank you so much. Same question, Florida Gulf Coast University. Across both implementation and go-live phases, what mechanisms have you used to gather faculty input?
So starting with implementation, we actually had faculty-led implementation teams. There was a couple of us on the administrative side, but that really helped us to have their insight because they know best what things they need out of the system. And then that also helped us to, again, sell that to the other faculty when we were going through initial training sessions, letting them know that their peers actually built this system. It wasn't just us forcing something upon them. We also created what we call Interfolio faculty partners. So it's a representative from each unit, and we meet with them a few times a semester to talk through if we have any new processes coming out or if there's certain processes already in the system that we might want to revise and get some feedback from them. We also did a couple surveys, focus groups, and then also every training session that we have, we hold about 30 a year on all the different processes in the system. We talk about how we're continually trying to improve, and we want your feedback. This isn't set in stone. So to give us that feedback, and we'll see what we can do with it.
Awesome. So I think something that's important for you to consider, especially if you're just starting to implement one of the modules, is that difference between implementation and go live. Because we knew from the beginning with implementation, we were going to have faculty-heavy teams. So it was Kristen and I and a whole lot of faculty. But then after the module is implemented, now what? And so that's where the Interfolio Faculty Partners Group became very key for us to be able to have faculty buy-in and say that, look, we're working on this with your peers. It also gives them special access to early previews of things we're working on. I'm going to tell you another key secret, and if you've heard me speak before, you've probably heard about this, but I love to invite the most critical faculty member on campus early and often, before things are fully baked. The ones that I know are going to write me a dissertation-length email, I'm going to invite them to preview what I'm working on. Do you know what that does? That stops that negativity from spreading across campus. I bring them in, I listen to their feedback, we make corrections, we explain that this is an iterative process, we're going to continue to work on it. But the other piece that's really important, I think, when you do that is your perspective. You have to frame your mind to understand that they're critical because they care. Now, some might just, that's their personality, but the majority of it is they're invested. They care about the university, they care about processes. Sometimes they're very afraid of change. I've been doing the same thing the same way for 30 years, and you are coming and disrupting my work, and I have students that I need to focus on. So I think it's really important as an administrator to frame your mind to be open to listening to their criticism. Don't take it personally. It's not an attack on what you've built. I know it feels like your baby when you spend every day in this system, but you can learn a lot from what they have to say. So I think it's really important to focus on that. And I think the messaging in every session that you have to talk about, we're open to change. We know it's not perfect. You know, I don't want to try and sell this system to anyone that it's perfect. So, you know, letting them know that we're open to change, that every day we're trying to make it a better system and a better product for our campus, for them.
Thank you so much. I don't know what you mean by a difficult faculty member, though. I've never met one. Never? It's never
Critical.
happened.
Critical, not difficult.
All right. Next question. And we will start off on this side with Florida Gulf Coast University. So how have you determined which faculty feedback to act on versus acknowledge? Maybe going back to that critical faculty member. And how have you navigated those decisions in ways that, we're going back to trust here, preserve trust and credibility?
Put on the next slide. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, so I think there's a couple things that were really important for us. One I just kind of mentioned, a little preview, is that humility of saying, I'm not perfect, what we're building isn't perfect. Anyone that has attended our trainings will know that I tell my faculty that there are 3 things that I have to keep in mind to begin with. There's system constraints, right? We heard about wonderful things that we're doing with the roadmap. There's university constraints. I have collective bargaining agreement and other governing documents I have to abide by. And then there's the things that I can fix. And so my job is to find the things that I can fix to make the process the best that it can for them. So with that in mind, there's a whole range of things, and we kind of put 5 on the screen, that we think about when we're evaluating the feedback that we get from faculty. Sometimes they just want to vent and they want somebody to listen. Sometimes they're uncomfortable with change and they need support. But we have to think about evaluating that faculty feedback in terms of their experience. Is it going to improve the faculty experience? What about institutional strategy? Does it align with the strategy of our president, our strategic plan, our provost? Does it align with our governing documents, our collective bargaining agreement, state reporting requirements? We are in Florida, so I shouldn't have to say much more than that. And then technical feasibility. Are they asking me for something that the system can do, right? And so we take all of that into consideration, and you want to talk about some of what we've done?
Yeah, on the screen you can see we had our water school come to us and ask if we could create an activity classification in the activities under public and community service so that they could capture if they were serving in the 5-county region. And so that can help our units run reports and do great things with that. Also in terms of communicating back to faculty after maybe something can't be done or can't be done right now. I think just being open and honest with them and explaining why maybe right now we can't do this really goes a long way to help keep their trust in us and in the system.
Excellent, thank you so much. So same question. Going back to that faculty feedback, how do you determine which faculty feedback to act on versus acknowledge, and how have you navigated those decisions to preserve that trust and credibility?
So we've had, in the last year and a half, we've had some significant leadership changes at our university. We have a brand new president starting this fall. We have a new provost that just started with us a few months ago. We had an interim provost in the meantime, and then the previous one had left. And the reason that I'm telling you all of that is we had a little bit of mission drift about the intention of the FAR. The provost who had kind of helped set the content that went into our FAR module back in 22, she no longer is there, and in fact, we're 2 provosts away from her. So the faculty were feeling that mission drift, and there was a loss of understanding of what is this for. The biggest questions we were getting from faculty in the last few months or so, as we're kind of in FAR season right now. So as we were gearing up to that for this year, were why are we doing the goals and what happens with them? And why do we have to do this in this particular time window? They were given kind of a shorter time window by which to complete it, and they were supposed to, in past years, complete it by the end of their contract, which is like June 15th or so. So we really paid attention to those questions, and I did a couple of things with that. Anne-Marie and I, of course, talked a lot about it, but I went to the Faculty Senate, actually went to a Faculty Senate meeting, talked through with them what some of those questions were, and really validated the experiences that they were having, that we're not really sure why we're doing this. And so even just that validation, that was one of your pieces, and letting the faculty kind of vent their valid frustrations about we're not understanding intent, what's the new provost even going to do with this data. So we made a transitional choice for this year with the FAR based on that feedback. And the way we got buy-in for it is we actually presented it as a proposal from us in the Office of Faculty Success, with the provost's blessing, to the Faculty Senate and the faculty. And we proposed a couple of things for this year. One is we've lengthened the window of time with which faculty can input their data and their information into the FAR. We're giving them, we started it at the start of this quarter, we're a quarter systems, the beginning of the spring quarter, and they now have through July 1st. That is post their contract date, but we heard from a lot of faculty, I don't have time to do this in the window that you're giving me to do it. So we opened it up. Now, the reason we gave them that deadline is we also really wanted to be clear with faculty of what is our current intention with this. The mission drift that we don't have is that we really use the data you report about your activities, your teaching, your scholarship, your amazing service, the grants you've gotten, to tell your story of excellence, both in our data reporting internally. But the second change we made, a transitional change, is we said, you know what? We're going to take out the goals this year. Because the original idea was the goals that they would be tied to decisions about workload planning. And that just had not been happening. They were supposed to be reviewed with the faculty by department chairs. That had not been happening consistently. So to faculty, it just felt like extra work. So we're going to be working this summer with our new provost to really look at what does she recommend that we propose to faculty go into the FAR around goals, links to workloads, so that there's a real clear understanding of how we're using that information. So we have found this approach this year was received very positively. Faculty are really appreciative that we've kind of streamlined the FAR for this year just to do the data collection piece of activities. We explained to them how that data is used in our annual data reporting and in information that the president reports back to regional accreditors in the institution. And we gave them a longer window
So you'll hear some of the same themes,
and
in
so
particular
that
about
has felt
uncertainty.
very iterative,
Statistics
but it's
is
also
the
felt
discipline of
like
making
a
decisions under
positive way
uncertainty.
to even
So in
increase
some
that
level, I'm
buy-in and
supposed
for
to be good
faculty
at
to
this.
know that we're listening to what their concerns are and that we welcome their ideas for how we continue to improve it. Sorry, that was really long.
On a shorter note, because that's definitely a longer project that we're working on, for as an example, but I think a lot of what our faculty have are questions about the VITA itself when we are submitting it, because it's just such a long document. Our faculty are doing wonderful work, that a lot of the questions that we get are like, how can we format this better, which key takeaway, thank you for your wonderful workshop yesterday.
You're welcome.
But it was really grateful for them to hear their feedback of, you know, we realize this is a fantastic tool, but we want to make sure it's not taking more time for us to review that. So I think on a like shorter communication on transparency, it's like, what are the rationale on why you want to change the VITA to look a certain way? Does it make sense to all department chairs who are reviewing it? Some of the things that we were able to do were, you know, making it simplified of committee member versus committee chair. That seems like a quick turnaround fix that we could do. And a lot of the other questions that we got were, well, this was only really impactful for your department and not for all. So we'll table that for now to see if that's something we could go to in the future. So I think in like a shorter type of example, I think it's just good to consistently ask the faculty of, why are you complaining? I guess this is not a little negative of the term, but why is this the reason that you're bringing this up to us? Is there something that we can do that will work for all areas? And if not, how can we work with you to fix this question that you have? So I think that's another way we try to make sure that all questions are still going to be asked, because if you consistently just say no, then I doubt they'll continue to ask those questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Speaking of questions, I hope everyone's writing theirs down. We'll have some time for questions and answers towards the end. But I'm going to move on to another question here. And I believe I'm handing it back over to Palo Alto University. How do you frame FAR as a tool for faculty advocacy rather than only institutional reporting?
That's a great question. Kind of what Kelly was mentioning at the last question, how a lot of the information then goes to reporting for the institution internally as well as institution externally. One of the ways that we can definitely showcase why there's benefit is that we have a State of the University presentation from our president every November, and we have these fantastic slides showcasing all of the wonderful things that our faculty are doing, which our board of trustees go to, which, you know, the staff and faculty get to see and showcase that material. And they always ask, where did they get that information? And we always tell them it comes directly from FAR. So if you're not completing your FAR, we're not going to be able to highlight the wonderful national leadership or the development or the publications that you're doing. And so that's one really useful tool, is getting a top-down approach from the university showcasing the benefit of the FAR. Another way that we talk about it is what we have a program with our new faculty called the New Faculty Development Program. It's a 2-year program for all of our incoming new faculty, whether they're new faculty in general or just new to the institution. And part of that is we give in more detailed training of the faculty activity report, as sometimes it's the first time that they've seen the Interfolio system, and we really tell them, this is how we get all of your information to showcase your wonderful accomplishments. We then use that for all kinds of connections with other areas of, oh, we're seeing you're doing all this stuff with your scholarship. Have you reached out to the grants office? And so then they can see that right from the beginning of how useful the FAR tools are. So I think those are two of the areas that we definitely do that, and I know may be some others. Kelly, do you want to add anything?
I really think you covered it. I think, again, as I mentioned, my role just before this year was faculty, and I will say, just when I'm wearing that hat, the slides that you see on the screen and when faculty accomplishments are highlighted, either in the president address, in data reports, we do faculty recognition and awards at the end of the year. Faculty like to feel that what they're doing and what they're contributing is noticed, meaningful, and additive. And I think that's sort of the ongoing messaging that we're really trying to cultivate about how we can really use this tool and continue to improve the tool, so that those are the things that we really can showcase. That also helps us market our programs at our university. So that's certainly, and it's not just advocacy for faculty or department resources, but it's also a way that we can kind of advocate for the amazing work we do at PAU.
Thank you so much. I like that you start nice and early. There's this 2-year development program. I'd love to hear more about it. All right, over to Florida Gulf Coast University. Same question. How do you frame FAR as a tool for faculty advocacy?
Well, first I want to say thank you for that idea. I love the President's Address. I think that's wonderful. I don't know if we would be able to get our president to do that with this size, but definitely something I'll take back to my provost, for sure. I think that's an idea. I think that there's something really important in what Kelly said. She mentioned feeling valued. And so if you look at research, it'll tell you that people will be more connected to an institution, to a department, if they have a sense of belonging and a sense of being valued. And so if you're trying to engage people and get buy-in and get them to be involved in the process, you need to create that sense of value, right? That sense of belonging. So we mentioned a little bit earlier that idea of storytelling, and I think that's really important. So I mentioned invisible labor. That was something that was a real narrative on our campus. So faculty were saying, look, I do all this work. You can't see it. You see my classes. You don't see all of this work that I'm doing. I'm on all these committees. I have all of this service. So one of the things that helped us was talking about this tool is going to highlight the additional invisible labor that you have outside of your classes, because I can pull a report on classes. But when it came to data integration and starting to build FAR, I have no data on service, right? So I'm building that data as we go so we can tell our faculty story, but we can also now provide data to our leadership to say, are we appropriately loading our workload for our faculty? Are we loading the junior faculty too much with the service commitments because our senior faculty have earned their stripes and they don't want to deal with that, right? So these are the conversation generators that the modules enabled us to start. And so it's important to think of it not just as buy-in for the faculty, but how are we using the system to create a new narrative on campus, to create a new discussion around workload for faculty. The other piece is using it to celebrate. So I love the idea about the president's piece. We do share data with our library and some other units on campus to help celebrate our faculty achievements. We just started rolling out FAR last year for evaluations. So we're babies in this, right? We've got 1 year of evaluations. We're in our 2nd cycle now. I'm starting to collect some cool stuff. And what's really important to me is not just that I know that they're doing cool stuff and I know that I have data to pull, but I'm starting to engage the academic leaders. I'm starting to engage the department chairs, the deans, those in the university that are closest to the faculty to say, look, this isn't just evaluation. You have a community service award you want to apply for? Well, guess what? I have data for you. Our Planning and Institutional Performance Office just 2 weeks ago asked me, can you get me data from Interfolio so that I can work on metrics for Strategic Plan Goal 5? Sure, I have that now, right? Is it perfect year 1 and year 2? No, I'm not going to lie to you. Has it been interesting telling the faculty, some of which really don't want to enter data into a system and are like, what are you doing with my information? Yes, it's been challenging. But it's that idea of advocacy and sharing that message of we're showing the full scope of your work. We're not trying to monitor you, we're trying to celebrate you. You're good?
That was so good.
Okay. Oh.
That was excellent. Thank you very much. All right, I think we're on to our last question. And I will hand it back over to Florida Gulf Coast University. So if another institution is beginning implementation, so if any of you in the audience are beginning implementation, what is one thing that you would strongly recommend they not postpone or delegate too lightly?
Yeah, we have two, sorry. So people and processes. So everybody's going to roll their eyes at me because you already asked and they said no. But support positions to help with this work, when we first implemented, we didn't realize how much it would add to our workload. We thought we were going to implement it. That's it. We're done. But we found that a lot of these processes that were previously decentralized ended up becoming centralized. And that's when we found a lot of discrepancies in how processes were being applied across units. And then just talking to support, the amount of trainings and support that we have to meet with faculty multiple times a week to get these processes complete. And I think our support model has really allowed for trust and buy-in from faculty. I think if we didn't have that, then they wouldn't be as supportive. And then also, again, looking at your processes and what are they actually doing versus what might be written in your governing documents, because we found that when we talked with faculty and we're putting this into implementation, that it didn't go exactly how we maybe thought it was supposed to go. So we did a lot of workflow mapping sessions, as you can see on the slide, to help us really understand and review those documents before trying to put them into a system.
I just want to add that workload mapping is really important. We'll actually talk about it tomorrow and talk about the lessons that we learned, because as you can see, that's just one example of one session, one set of notes. So we invited faculty, we invited administrators, we invited staff, and we said, tell us what you're doing. Let's start from the very first moment you even think about something like evaluation. What happens? Who touches it? Where does it go? I know this is going to be really shocking, but nobody was following the process. Okay, there might have been one department, okay? They made their own forms, they had their own workflows, but we really didn't know how deep that went because we got it at the end. So our troubleshooting began when I got the evaluation packet and maybe the ratings weren't very clear. We didn't realize there was so much inequity along the process, and that when you put something into a system that expects things to make sense, we're trying to put something in there that now doesn't make sense. So we've got to streamline that. So it's really important to think about your processes. What are they actually doing? And are they following your governing documents? So if you're collectively bargained, I would start with your CBA. We found, I'll give you one example, evaluations. All of our college deans were signing the evaluations. Guess what the CBA says? The deans don't sign the evaluations. The chairs do. The dean serves as an appeal. So I had to go to the deans and meet with them and say, look, I know you've been signing them, but guess what? You're not going to sign them because we're violating our own governing documents. They were cool with it. Some of them didn't want like 300 evaluations to sign. But it was really key in our processes to start at that place and think about what's that process look like. And then I just want to say, Kristen is amazing. She's been with me since day one, since we started talking about putting this project in place and implementing these modules. And I was fortunate enough to ask the provost for some funding for a position. I will also say with that is that if you have someone that promotes from within because they're a rock star and you put them in that position, make sure you backfill the other position right away. We've talked a little bit with some colleagues today about this idea of centralized versus decentralized. You need to think about that in the beginning and adequately make sure that you have support, because if you're centralizing it in the provost office, there's some benefits, but you're going to need the manpower to do that. If you're decentralizing it to the units, you've got to be really strategic in the way that you do that, and there might also be a need for incentives to enhance the pay or whatnot for the staff in those colleges that are going to take on this new role.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Same question over to Palo Alto University.
I don't know if I've ever been on a panel that I'm taking notes about one of my current panelists is also saying. I was like, oh, I got to remember that. I think for us, it's really kind of with the gift of hindsight, it's really not just that early communication of, hey, we're going to do this and we need to build it, but really trying to connect to the why. And there may be multiple whys, and that's okay. You know, there's reasons we need to implement this system and get the data from the president and board and cabinet level, from the, you know, DASA, Department of Academic and Student Affairs level, for our institutional effectiveness level. But understanding the whys and then really connecting back to the whys for faculty, I think is a really key piece of this. And I think the second thing I've learned, I'm sort of new to this. Anne-Marie is really the expert on what this has been like, the whole trajectory of implementation. But what I'm learning is that communication and that revisiting the why and really looking at what the tool needs to be and what it can become. I mean, just really think of it as iterative, that wherever you start is probably not where you're going to end up, and probably not even where you're going to be several iterations down the line. And that, you know, to be a little comfortable with that and be okay with the fact that the launch might be clunky because you just got to get something out there, but then you're going to learn from it and really get the input and the feedback, iterate that communication, and continue to improve.
That was great. Thank you, Kelly. I think another thing to consider is that when you are in the process of implementing and then post go live, that there's, you know, of course you're going to have trainings, but it's always important to have someone on a faculty standpoint to attend those trainings, to kind of be your buy-in assistant, because what you're going to say in those drop-in sessions, in those training sessions on, you know, this is how you click this and why we're doing blank and all of those things, if you don't have someone who's a faculty member that the faculty attending that training session respect and think is going to be a good, you know, team member for colleague, sharing some of those things, then they're not always necessarily going to listen to it the first time. But if they hear that the department chair is like, oh, and we do this for WASC accreditation, this is why, and the history of why we're adding it to this specific question and why we're asking it this way, and look, it's so easy, you just click it, you don't have to type anything in, you just click and push enter, then they're like, oh, this isn't that so scary. It isn't super challenging to do this. Oh, this took like 3 seconds. That's great. So while we're great and wonderful and have wonderful things to say of those trainings, I would say I would really recommend a faculty partner to assist with those trainings, because then you'll have less questions afterwards because they're listening to what that faculty member is stating.
Thank you so much.